On today's episode, we continue our March mock draft, looking at picks 17 to 32, highlighted by some massive swings on upside by the Philadelphia Flyers and the Chicago Blackhawks. All that and more coming up here at Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm Sebastian, and on today's show, we are going to take up where we left off yesterday and wrap up our March mock draft, looking at picks 17 through 32. And before we jump straight into that, this episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Let's see Sleeper's terms of use for details. So let's jump straight into the action here with pick 17, which belongs to the New York Islanders. The Islanders always have a preference of drafting players that fit their specific style. Lou Lamoriello adores his gritty, high-energy players, and we have him selecting Jet Lachenko out of the OHL. Lachenko is a 5'10", 165-pound centerman playing with the Guelph Storm in the OHL, and he's been quite steadily climbing rankings over the course of this season. He's a high-motor playmaker, which is a mold of player that the Islanders always quite appreciate, and while he's not the biggest player in the world, which might not make him the most typical Islanders draft selection, I mean, they spent their highest draft pick last year on Danny Nelson, who was very much a big physical potential bottom six centerman. Lachenko brings significantly more upside to the table. He uses his energy a lot to overwhelm defenders, to access the middle of the ice. He's definitely not a player that's pushed to the perimeter, and he uses the physicality that he does have to his advantage. He likes to out-leverage opponents. He gets involved in puck battles and very much plays with like a high-end grit per 60, which the Islanders will certainly appreciate. And while he may have more limited upside than the next couple players that we're going to look at here in this mock draft, he also has a decently high floor and stylistically is a quite nice fit with the New York Islanders. Next up, the Philadelphia Flyers at pick 18 here take a swing on a player that I'm a massive fan of, Igor Chernyshov. The Flyers have not exactly been afraid of spending high draft selections on Russian players in recent drafts, having very recently picked Matvei Michkov at 7th overall, and Chernyshov is a style of player that I think would complement Michkov really nicely at the NHL level in a couple years' time, where Michkov is the all-out offense with a lot of intelligence and a massive amount of skill. Chernyshov does have a lot of skill. He kind of plays the modern European power forward role, stylistic similarities to players like Yuri Slafkovsky, for instance. He likes to have the puck on his stick, really skilled puck handler, very capable goal scorer as well. Playmaking is very much a work in progress and is probably where he's most limited in the offensive zone at this stage. But beyond that, he brings a ton of defensive value to the table. He's been playing pretty high-end defensive hockey at the KHL level this season, and he's consistently well-positioned, constantly adjusting, constantly applying pressure in the defensive zone, quite calculated with when he does apply that pressure, when he does closes gaps aggressively, brings a lot to the table, what you would want to ask for from a physical, defensive-leaning forward at the KHL level as a draft eligible. And on top of that, in transition, he's really very effective as well, constantly going for give and goes, doesn't hang on to the puck for overly long, but really quickly wants to move up ice and make things happen in the offensive zone. And as I mentioned, the playmaking game is a work in progress, and if he'd want to play with Michkov at the next level, that would be a rather useful thing to develop. But I think he'd be a very complimentary piece for the Philadelphia Flyers to add to their ever increasingly stocked prospect cupboard, and certainly bring some elements that I think the organization and the fan base specifically would really appreciate. Next up, the Chicago Blackhawks, after getting Ivan Demidov at 4th overall, they go out and pick another massive swing on upside with Adam Jiricek here at 19. Jiricek has missed the last couple months since early January at the World Junior Championships to injury, and he's out for the rest of the season. So there have been limited viewings this season, and they've been marred with inconsistency, especially against professional competition. But the flashes of high-end upside with him have been more impressive than almost any other player available left at this stage of the draft. At his best, Adam Jiricek is an elite skater, really quite creative with the puck on a stick in the offensive zone, a bit of a general as a puck distributor offensively against junior competition, which has very much been missing against the professional competition. But those flashes are rather promising. And on top of that, he brings a lot of physical tools to the table. He's still a bit undersized, like he's only 168 pounds listed at. And despite that, plays with tremendous levels of violence and really makes a difference on the physical side of things. So when he is able to add some more weight to his frame, he's going to be a really impactful physical presence and could really leverage that to his benefit in the defensive zone with time. And while he's going to take a couple years to develop, the Chicago Blackhawks have the luxury of patience here, and waiting on him, I think, could really reap some nice benefits in a couple years' time. Next up, the Vegas Golden Knights somehow hung on to this draft selection, and while it is here at 20th overall, they're clearly gearing up for a playoff run, hoping it'll be maybe 5, 10, 12 slots lower come draft day. But for the time being, this is where Tankathon has them going, and I have them selecting Sasha Boisvert. We have seen their tendencies with drafting in the last couple seasons. I mean, they've traded away every player they've drafted, but we've seen them actually pick players, which I see them going with a highly intelligent, toolsy player, perhaps stylistically along the same lines of like Zach Dean, Nick Suzuki, Cody Glass, that they've been quite valuing at the draft since their inception as a franchise. And I think that Sasha Boisvert really fits that mold for them. He is an intelligent, skilled, dual threat in the offensive zone. He's quite engaged off puck, quite a good give and go player in transition, really a play connector on his line there in Muskegon in the USHL. He is a 6'2", 176-pound center, and I think that he really fits what the Vegas Golden Knights have been valuing on draft day recently. And on top of that, his style of player is always valued among NHL organizations and offers a decent amount of value if he is a prospect that they look to flip in a year or two's time at the deadline when they try to make yet another playoff push. Next up, the Nashville Predators, to wrap up this segment, have really been making a mark in terms of making some swings on upside ever since Barry Trotz took the reins as general manager of that franchise, and very much lent down that way in their first draft, which happened in Nashville, which I was happy enough to experience live. Was certainly an experience. And so I have them going with Michael Hage. He is a 6'1", 190-pound center playing with the Chicago Steel in the USHL. And while he missed a ton of time in his D-1 and took a bit of time this year to get going and really hit the next gears in terms of being an impactful two-way skilled force in the USHL, he has really been playing some impressive hockey in recent months. This is one of the most toolsy players still available at this stage in the draft. He could go anywhere between like 15 and 35 come draft day, and I can see the Nashville Predators taking the swing on upside with him. He's a player who was just absolutely dominant at playing AAA hockey with the Toronto Junior Canadiens a couple seasons ago, and has been really rediscovering that form of play recently. He's a tremendous skater. His puck skills are well above average. He's a really capable playmaker, quite patient with the puck puck on his stick, very composed under pressure, very good stick handler as well. And on top of all those offensive tools, he brings a decent amount of defensive engagement and intelligence to the table as well, which I think is really going to help him translate to the NCAA level next season, where he'll be playing with the University of Michigan, which just routinely turns out high-level players that make the jump to the NHL quite fluidly after graduating the college ranks. And I think that Michael Hage is a player who will be a high-value selection here at 21st overall. Now, we'll jump right back in at 22 with the LA Kings right after these messages from our sponsors over at Sleeper. We're past the halfway point of the NHL season now, with the trade deadline now in the rearview mirror, but there's still time for you to get in on the action with Sleeper. Sleeper is our #1 choice here at the Locked On NHL Network for all of your daily fantasy hockey needs. That's because with Sleeper, you have the chance to win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And all you need to do to win 100 times your money is to correctly predict the outcome of 8 specific player stats. And you can get really creative with that, whether you want to take the safe bets on the stars of the league, whether it be the Nikita Kucherovs or the Connor McDavids, the Nathan McKinnons. The choice is yours. Or maybe, falling more in line with the topic of this specific podcast, you want to take the swings on the NHL young guns, like Connor Bedard, for instance, who's been playing some pretty good hockey on a rather weak Chicago Blackhawks team this season. The choice is yours with Sleeper. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, let's jump right back into it with the mock draft, continuing with the LA Kings at 22nd overall. I think that the LA Kings are going to take the swing on upside and raw tools here on a player who's slipping on draft day in Trevor Connolly. Connolly is a really divisive prospect, and not all that much of that has to do with the on-ice product. He is supremely skilled, probably the most dynamic player remaining on the table at this stage of the draft, and plays with a ton of skill, constantly testing out his capabilities, testing the limits of what he's able to do as a puck handler, as a play creator, and his upside in the NHL is quite easily well within the top 6. The floor is quite a bit lower as well, and there's some risk there in the on-ice product, but more of the question marks lie in the off-ice, where there have been some big question marks around quote-unquote character, which we do see with a couple prospects every single draft cycle. And while there have been some reports coming out that he's been really improving his standing on that front and working on the personal side of things, there will definitely still be some aversion on draft day for NHL teams to take the plunge with their first selection. But with Marc Bergevin in that hockey ops department, I think that there will be a push to just take the swing on upside here with this player and work with the human being on a personal level to make sure that he can make the jump to the NHL in good faith. And I think that the upside here is just massive. And we've been seeing what the LA Kings have been able to do with high upside players in recent years. I mean, Quinton Byfield was really raw, but was a massive swing to take at 2nd overall, and just a wonderful result that we've been seeing here this season, with all of those physical tools and mental creativity translating wonderfully to the NHL level now that things are starting to click into place. So I think that Trevor Connolly would be a really nice fit in that Los Angeles organization, and his skill could really be fostered to be a high-end top 6 piece in a couple of years' time. Next up, the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is an interesting one for me because it's a new management group, some of the same scouts as old, but predicting who they might draft is perhaps a little bit more interesting now because we only have a single draft to sample with this management group. So I see them taking a very interesting swing here at 23rd overall in Jesse Pulkkinen, the 6'6", 216-pound left shot defenseman playing with Yip Yeveskala in Liga this season, who is a D+1. We have an overager here in the first round, and he is an absolute unicorn in terms of style. Just a fascinating player in terms of how he's able to combine the offensive tools, the raw tools. He's a tremendous puck handler, really comfortable with the puck on his stick, has a high level of composure. Perhaps his panic threshold's almost too high. He can wait a bit too long at times when he's being pressured, overestimating his own abilities against professional competitions at times. But he's very much testing his own limits this season and seeing what he really can do when he's trying things. And he's certainly been trying things. The upside with Pulkkinen is really high in terms of overage upside. I don't think we've seen a higher one in recent drafts than Jesse Pulkkinen, and he could be a really dynamic two-way defenseman inside a top four within 2 or 3 years' time, if all goes well with him. He uses his size, mobility, and reach to just shut down plays in defensive transition and very quickly then springs counterattacks. He's a capable breakout passer, very composed under pressure, and we've been seeing him jump up and activate in the offensive zone and create some very special plays there. So this is a very interesting player to me that I think would work very nicely in Toronto's system and would be a fascinating swing on upside for the Maple Leafs to take. Next up, the Anaheim Ducks have their second pick of the first round here, and they got this from the Edmonton Oilers in that Adam Henrique trade. And I have them taking a swing on an intelligent, dynamic player who may not fit the need, but the Anaheim Ducks have never been afraid of collecting assets in positions of strength and just developing them as best they can. And I think that Alphonse Frey is a player that they will be really enticed to select here, despite their depth at left defense in their prospect pool. I mean, from Pavel Mintyukov to Jackson Lacombe, who are already playing some really good NHL minutes. You have a lot of depth there in terms of young left shot defensemen in Anaheim, but Alphonse Frey is quite comfortable playing on both sides, whether it be on the left or on the right. And he is a dynamic player with the puck on his stick. He loves to carry the puck up the ice. He's just as capable a puck carrier as he is a breakout passer. And in the offensive zone, he's probably one of the more dynamic playmakers that we've seen from the blue line in the last 2 draft classes. When he really is on his game, he's constantly shifting his weight, trying to get to the inside, trying to create space for himself and his teammates. He's a capable puck handler, really fun playmaker. Goal scoring is still a bit of a work in progress, and working on that side of the game could make him even more of a versatile threat in the offensive zone. And on top of that, he likes to keep really close gaps when defending the rush. He's a great skater and is able to match the footwork of forwards attacking, and very rarely gives up the inside lanes. So he's a player that I think Anaheim would love to work with. A ton of raw tools, a ton of intelligence, and a ton of creativity, and a desire to test the limits of his game, which I think the Ducks will absolutely adore at this slot. Next up, at 25th overall, Nikita Artemonov to the Carolina Hurricanes. This is about the easiest player I have in terms of projecting to an NHL team apart from Macklin Celebrini, whichever team picks first overall, because the Carolina Hurricanes adore their highly intelligent, high upside, high floor, high energy wingers, especially when they're coming out of Russia. And I know that their scout, the Russian scout Oleg Smirnov, is a massive fan of players in this mold, whether it be Timur Mukhanov or Alexander Rykov. Artemonov brings a ton to the table. He's been playing most of the season in the KHL with Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod and has been playing a lot of second line minutes and second power play minutes in that time. He's a really capable playmaker. He's been working a lot on on focusing his playmaking towards the middle of the ice, towards the middle of the slot as the season's progressed, which is making me rather hopeful with how that's going to project to the NHL level, especially considering that he's been doing this against professional competition night in, night out so far this season. The defensive game is still a bit of a work in progress. There's a high level of engagement, but the actual positioning and the micro adjustments and reading what lanes to get into and which player to cover is still a little bit of an area of weakness in his game, but there's a level of intensity in how he approaches the defensive side of things that I think that he will be able to be molded into a far more efficient defensive player than he is at this stage, especially especially with just how well his scanning habits serve his offensive game. Being able to apply that to the defensive side of things is really going to be able to take him to the next level as a two-way winger at the NHL level in a couple of years' time. And after this break, we're going to return at 26th overall with the Dallas Stars, picking one of my personal favorites in this draft class. But first, a message from our sponsors over at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, let's wrap up this episode and our mock draft here with the final couple selections of the draft. Starting off here with the Dallas Stars, who've had a tendency of drafting some pretty high-value players in lower value draft slots in recent years. I mean, I'm thinking of players like Wyatt Johnson and Logan Stankoven, two of my favorite young NHLers in the league today. And I think they're going to go with a player who, at least at this stage, is relatively undervalued relative to his profile and his production and his overall stylistic profile at this stage in Dominik Bydinka. Bydinka has been playing some really good minutes in the SHL this season with the Malmö Redhawks, and he's a 6'3" right shot defenseman, 183 pounds, who combines a strong level of physicality and very good in-zone defending abilities, constantly scanning, keeps a very tight gap against the rush, constantly monitoring the different threats, like the secondary threats as well when he's defending the slot, gets involved both with his stick and his physicality on the defensive side of things, and he pairs that with a really striking breakout game. He's a capable breakout passer, and he constantly has a simple play in his back pocket while he's surveying the ice for higher end plays to make, whether it be a stretch pass crossing into the neutral zone or carrying the puck up himself to his own defensive blue line in order to create some more space and a more dynamic rush chance. While his puck skills are certainly a little bit more limited in terms of the puck handling specifically. He has a locked top hand, which limits his ability to handle pressure as a handler specifically. The passing game and the mental processing speed really have enabled him at the SHL level, which is excellent quality of competition, to be a quite capable second pairing defenseman for good spurts along this season. He's been playing more limited minutes in recent games, with Malmö wanting to really win those late season games in the SHL. But the level of hockey he's been able to play and the composure he's had has made him look a lot more like a 23-year-old on the ice than an 18-year-old. So I think he's a player that Dallas would really quite appreciate. We've seen them like a perhaps stylistically similarly profiled player in Leon Bichsel a couple drafts ago, and I see a lot more composure and intelligence in his on-puck game with Dominik Bydinka compared to Bichsel. So he's also a right shot defenseman, which is even bigger of a premium, so I think that he'd be a great selection here for the Dallas Stars at 26th overall. Next up, the Colorado Avalanche always pick high-value players on draft day. We saw it last year with like Ethan Gauthier, for instance, and And here I have them going with Beckett Seneca out of Oshawa of the OHL. He's a 6'2", 181-pound winger who has a ton of raw tools. He's really dynamic with the puck on his stick, constantly trying to create with his handling and his playmaking skills. And he's quite a capable goal scorer on top of that. He's still a little bit wonky on his feet. The skating is probably the weakest grade in terms of the overall tools, but it's not a debilitating tool by any stretch of the imagination, and has more to do with the recent growth spurt than anything else. So I think that Beckett Seneca, who also obviously brings a lot of value on the defensive side of the puck, would be a really enticing option for the Colorado Avalanche to mold him into a versatile and also dynamic middle of the lineup winger who could really play up in the lineup when needed, when injuries arise, which is just the most Colorado player to target on draft day in the first round. Next up, the Ottawa Senators. This is a pick they got back from the Boston Bruins, via the Detroit Red Wings in that Alex DeBrincat trade. And after picking Cole Eiserman in the top 10, I see them picking a defenseman here. And they really do need to add some more defensive solidity to their defensive core if you're looking at their current NHL standing. And I think that Matt Vaishnavan would be a really interesting one. He's a very raw player, especially in his on-puck game, but he's a 6'2", 172-pound lefty who's been playing some really good defensive hockey in the KHL this season. He's a really capable rush defender, constantly keeps a really close gap, suffocates plays against the boards, really capable in his own zone as well, defending the cycle. He uses his reach really well and very much a stick first then body, but he uses his body quite often as well as a physical presence, even against professional competition. Bigger questions arise in his on-puck game. He really struggles with the puck on his stick. He is very much a deer in the headlights under pressure, but when paired with more of a puck-moving presence, he could really be an impactful defensive first piece on the blue line, and perhaps could really learn a lot from a player like Artyom Zub stylistically. And I think he would fit Ottawa really nicely in what the organization values and what they are kind of missing at this stage as a team. Next up, the Montreal Canadiens. This is the pick they got from the Sean Monahan deal, and I see them doubling down on Medicine Hat Tigres here after picking Caden Lindstrom at second overall and winning the lottery, picking the 6'4" center. They now select the dynamic, speedy winger that has been absolutely thriving alongside Lindstrom throughout this season before injuries kind of broke up that pairing with Lindstrom going down. But Andrew Basha is a 6 foot, 185-pound left winger. Stylistically, has some pretty similar traits to a player like Alex Newhook, for instance, who the Montreal Canadiens clearly value quite a bit. He's intelligent. He's a tremendously speedy player, absolute transition beast, constantly pushing the pace and pushing the limits of his own skill and his playmaking ability. He's perhaps a bit more limited on the goal scoring side of things, and not the biggest threat to score from medium range, but he has shown flashes of getting closer to the crease and getting some more of those dirty goals as the season's progressed. And the soft skill with him has a lot of room to grow. And I think especially the connection between him and Lindstrom is something that could really be fostered, and there'd be a higher likelihood of getting an impactful top six piece out of Andrew Basha when continuously paired with Caden Lindstrom. Next, the New York Rangers are selecting here, and after picking Gabe Perreault in the first round last year, which is just aging wonderfully well, I see them going with Leon Mugli here, who is a 6 foot, 172-pound left shot defenseman playing with EV Zug in Switzerland this season, playing professional hockey, and has been just really impressive in terms of being able to blend on-puck composure with defensive intelligence, very efficient in all three zones. He's been an analytical darling at the professional level this season, and while he struggled a lot more at the World Juniors, playing a bit more of an offensive role, I do think that Mugli has a pretty high likelihood of being a reliable piece in a bottom four. There's definitely some second pairing potential with him, but at the very least, I think you're getting an intelligent, reliable, and versatile, perhaps Brett Kulak-esque third pairing defenseman if continuously developed with his current trajectory. And at best, you're getting a versatile puck mover on a second pairing who can also consistently create advantages in the defensive zone on the defensive side of the puck. Next, the Calgary Flames, with their second pick of the first round after winning the lottery for Macklin Celebrini. They have a ton of room here to just take a massive swing on a player they like. So I have them going with Emil Hemming here, who might go a lot higher come draft day or might go a lot lower. He has a big gap between his upside and his floor, in my view. But and while this season he's very much been developing that floor, I think that the upside as a goal scorer is still quite interesting with him. He has a wicked release. He's quite physical. He's already quite physically mature. He is a 6'2", 194-pound right winger playing with TPS and Liga in Finland, playing mainly professional hockey this season, and playing junior hockey. He's just been absolutely racking up the goals. And in professional hockey, he's been playing a bit more of a defensive role in the bottom six for TPS. And in that role, he's been learning a lot more of the habits that will allow him to translate to the NHL. And I think that Calgary would be quite enticed by his combination of physical tools, goal scoring ability, and refining defensive skills as well this season. So he'd be an interesting pick there. And the final piece of the return in that Elias Lindholm trade. And last but not least, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. And I think that after taking a big swing on upside with Igor Chernyshov, they go for perhaps a slightly lower upside player here who fits the team, who very much fits the team ideology. In Tanner Howe, this is a high motor, highly intelligent, high leadership type of player who's been captaining the Regina Pats this season after learning under the tutelage of Connor Bedard last year, who plays a perhaps Brendan Gallagher-esque game at times. He likes to really score a lot of his goals from about 2 feet around the goal, around the crease. And has been a bit of a one-man show in Regina this season, having to do a lot on his own and playing some really solid hockey despite that. While he has been slipping down draft rankings recently and could very much be a second-round selection at the end of the day, I have him here as the final pick of the first round because he really does fit Philadelphia's organizational philosophy, but also the new management and what they value with Daniel Briere there as an undersized, high motor, high character type player who also has some decent offensive and defensive upside at the end of the day. And that wraps things up for our March mock draft. We're probably going to have at least another mock draft before draft day, and likely the next one I will not be alone in it, so it will be more of a joint exercise with my co-host Hattie Kalakesh. But this wraps things up for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. We're right around the corner from the 1,000 subscriber milestone, so it'd be massively appreciated if you could help give us a boost to get there. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, go and check out Locked On Sports Today for all the news you could possibly want of what's going on in the sporting world today. And yeah, that wraps things up for today. Thank you again for tuning in and have a lovely rest of your day.